Welcome to IBBA InSights, providing expert advice on buying or selling small businesses. IBBA InSights is presented by the International Business Brokers Association, the world's largest nonprofit organization for those helping others sell or buy businesses. Now, here's your host, Cress Diglio.
Hello and welcome to IBBA InSights. Today we're going to talk about a topic we don't normally talk about on the show, and that's politics. But we do talk about business. And guess what? We're in an election year here in the United States, which means businesses can and will be affected. The questions are, how will they be affected? What changes could you be in store for? And what should business owners be on the lookout for? These are all important questions. So we're going to answer all these questions and many others surrounding the business climate and the 2024 election. So how do you do that? You bring on a guest who's the perfect person to address these issues that are concerning to all of us. My guest is a 6-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. He's the political anchor at Spectrum News 1 channel, broadcast across North Carolina. He's seen nightly on Capitol Tonight. He's the host of the extremely popular Tying It Together podcast and has a monthly show, Front Porch Politics. It's my pleasure to introduce Tim Boyum to IBBA InSights. Welcome, Tim.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate you even thinking of me.
I was so happy that Neil Isaacs was able to connect you and I together because I've been in this business for 25 years and I'd say 4 years, really every 2 years, depending on the cycle and what elections are coming up, there's something always going on and business always seems to be affected. And you have this roller coaster of some people going, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. And then the election's over. And sometimes it's okay, back to business as usual, but you've seen and done it all. And you mind telling us how you got into this profession? Because you do a wonderful job.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, one of the interesting things about politics these days is it used to be really a lot of people, even including the business world, pay attention every 4 years or maybe 2 years for state legislature and Congress. But it's really a 365-day, 24/7 business now. And it is a business. Politics is a business. And these things are being impacted for businesses and society alike on a daily basis, not every couple or every 4 years. My story goes back, frankly, all the way to high school. I needed a class to take, an elective, after I stopped playing basketball because I was too short and not athletic enough. And I didn't want to take a lot of other classes, and journalism popped up. And so I worked on the high school newspaper and inevitably moved my way through a small TV station and fell in love with, I got infected with the news bug, so to speak. And I was working at a TV station in high school even. And then I knew I wanted to do it at that point. And so I went to college specifically for it, got through college quicker than probably normal because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I started out at a small station in Eureka, California, which is 4 hours north of San Francisco. There's still 4 hours north of San Francisco in California. And then I took a chance on the upstart station in North Carolina. And that was in 2002. And I have been here ever since, which I like to say with how much North Carolina is growing, that makes me almost a native North Carolinian.
It's interesting to hear your story and your start. I've been doing a few interviews lately, and the main theme from the individuals I've talked to has been, I knew what I wanted to do from a young age, following your dream, the passion that you have for it. So this just ties right in line with that. I was doing a lot of research because I really wanted to, you're usually on the other side of it, right? You're the one hosting the show. And so today you get to answer the question. So in researching, I noticed that in 2016 was really a big moment or a defining moment in your career. You were working on the floors of both the Republican and Democrat national conventions, and it earned you recognition as one of the top Capitol reporters in the United States. What did you do that stood out from all the other reporters?
I think it starts with where I work. Before I was somewhere at Cable News, now it's Spectrum News, the same news organization. We have just a firm belief in the importance of politics. Even back when it wasn't as crazy and scandalous and all that. I don't mean scandalous towards any individual, just in general, it's become an event coverage. We've covered it down to the local city councils all the way up to the White House from day one, even when it wasn't popular to. And we focus on that a lot. And so we've consistently been a go-to source for politics, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. We've got stations in all kinds of other states and whatnot. And now we've got a national Spectrum News Plus that airs and streams all over the world. And I think that consistency made us a place to go. And so we started getting, I can remember back in the early days when people didn't understand what a local 24-hour news station was, and I could barely get them to answer the phone. I remember back in '08, I would watch all the other stations go backstage in the interview with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton when they were in that tight race, and we would just be sitting there and they wouldn't even look at me. But we fought hard and continued our reputation year after year, where by 2016, the candidates were, I wasn't even calling them, they were calling me to interview with them. And that's not a yay me. It's just we've built that over time and stayed consistent and true that government and politics coverage was that important. And so it became easier when I was on the floors of those conventions to have U.S. Senator Richard Burr walk up to me to do an interview. I did interviews with Donald Trump that year. And we just had all these big interviews. And I think it just got the attention finally after more than a decade of hard work to get their attention and thankfully get that kind of recognition that not just me, but our teams in North Carolina across the country did that. So in a lot of ways, it was just good old fashioned hard work.
So the story of an overnight success story took only 10 years.
It's funny, most people see those things in the other businesses too, in success stories, but there's a long story before that of hard work to get there. I think, my wife, we were watching American Idol recently. I think there is sometimes overnight success stories like that, especially for 15-year-olds. But the real true story is there's trials and tribulations, successes and failures that lead to success in any business. And it takes hard work. Rarely is it luck. Very rarely is.
You got to experience the journey, but all anyone ever sees are the end results. And it's like, oh, wow, look at that. It came out of nowhere. We didn't even know it existed a year ago, right? Then all of a sudden you're the one being called by everybody. But yeah, the hard work, perseverance, but yeah, people will see that. They're going to see the overnight success story, but they don't live the journey like you did. It's interesting in politics, because you mentioned it earlier about being a 365-day cycle. If politics were a sport, there wouldn't be an off season, right? They would just continually go on. We really want to jump into the things that are going to affect this political cycle. We're going into a presidential election year. But based on your experience and observations, what are the most critical factors for businesses to watch in this election year?
Yeah, it's interesting. And in some ways, it's the same thing that we always think about. It's funny because you're going to hear about abortion and a lot of these issues that get a lot of attention, particularly in national news. But at the end of the day, the likelihood of how people are going to vote is going to matter about their wallet. It just almost always does. So I think inflation is going to be a major point of discussion this year. A lot of the numbers on inflation, broadly speaking, that people don't dig into are looking good. However, people are still sick and tired of high grocery prices when fuel prices spike, when things that are consumer centric right in front of their face. And so I think consumer confidence, which we'll probably talk about a little later, but I think that is a huge thing that I think businesses should watch really closely. If people in this era want to complain about everything, it's important for people to really look into what they're saying, what they're doing, because what they're doing is probably more important to a business than what they're saying on that front. Interest rates is another thing that I've been watching closely. A lot of economists I've talked to, obviously businesses take out loans and rely on that for their livelihood. In a lot of situations, they're borrowing to build, to expand. A lot of economists I've talked to thought that the Fed would reduce those already, and they're not, which likely shows some sort of concern still about where we are in the economy. Taxes, with state IM, there's likely to be more debate about whether we see tax reductions or not from the state legislature. By the way, state legislatures don't get as much coverage as they should or pay attention to, because much of what they pass impacts businesses more so even than Congress or what the White House does. Immigration is going to be, it's always a huge debate, whether anything gets done or not. A lot of businesses rely on immigration. And I'm not talking just about illegal immigration, which gets all the attention. There's migrant workers that come up to work on farms. There's visa issues for other international workers that are a big deal that get caught into these debates. And then I think energy is another really big one that a lot of businesses deal with, whether it's the light switch in their small office or energy production to run factories. The debate over how fast we move toward renewables and the reliability of that, even down to EV cars, and whether we can meet goals that have been set in the 2030s, 2040s, and 2050s, whether that happens, or if say Donald Trump wins and there's a push away from that and a lot of those regulations and those deadlines, I think that will have a huge impact on businesses as they look towards not just next year, but 5, 10, 15 years from now. As I'm sure most of your listeners know, you don't just plan for tomorrow. You got to plan well beyond that. So those are some of the sort of boilerplate things that I think businesses probably should and will be watching closely.
You said something that confirmed a theory or a thought or a belief that I've had for many years. People argue politics all the time. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm an independent, whatever you are. But when it comes down to voting, if they're making a lot of money and the economy is doing well, very rarely do you see someone voted out. I made this statement back before the last election because the economy was so strong and doing so well and people were making money. I go, there's no way in the world Donald Trump's going to lose unless something crazy happens. Then something ridiculously crazy happened that we never saw before and hopefully we'll never see again. And there it went. And I truly believe a large part of the voters go out and they vote by how they feel at that time. Hey, don't upset the apple cart. We're doing well. But I know there are other factors that play into it. But it was interesting that you said that. But I've often marveled at the power of the media and the influence they have. And again, not to pinpoint anyone out, but you all know the different news coverages and channels that are out there. You could listen to a story on one news channel, a current event that's going on, turn over to another news channel, and then turn over to a third one. And when you're done watching all three, you thought you were hearing two completely different stories. So how does the media coverage, especially during an election year, influence business and investor or individual sentiment?
Well, greatly. And the economy is a perfect example of that. Because, look, if Joe Biden's economy, and let's just put this bluntly, he's in charge. So whoever's in charge, regardless of what it looks like, they take the blame or get credit for it, for better or for worse. Just the way that American politics works in this day and age. So if you look at a lot of the indicating factors, what the market just went over 40,000, which a lot of people are happy with their 401ks. Obviously, companies are happy about that. But, that doesn't necessarily help someone that is, barely scraping by, that's paying twice for a loaf of bread of what they did, 4 years ago. And so the reality of the situation is that in a lot of instances, the economy is looking pretty good. Unemployment's low. Inflation has gone down. Obviously, it has significantly. It went up so high. And there's investment, which arguably you could say led to the inflation. But there's lots of investment from the Biden administration into clean water infrastructure, into transportation, roads and highways, broadband, all those kinds of things. But again, like I said earlier, people are sick and tired of paying $3 or whatever for a carton of eggs. And here's the truth that economists will tell you is that with groceries in particular, they're not going to go back down. There was a report yesterday that a few things went down a little bit, but the truth is that those prices likely aren't going to drop like a lot of other commodities like gas. They're there to stay. They may not go up as high, but they're not going to go much lower. And so that is Joe Biden's issue with that. So what, to your point, if you go to Fox News, the economy's in the tank and everybody's, struggling to pay their mortgage, which a lot of people are, and grocery prices. But then if you go to MSNBC, for instance, which people view as the left-leaning one, they're going to talk about how unemployment's so low and the economy's doing great. We just got to change some things and, talk about trade and to help lower prices. And so a lot of this is difficult for the consumer media to figure out, to sort through and whatnot. And we're in an era, the future as well, where we need consumers to be very active in vetting where and how they get their news. And it's a tough spot that we're all in.
I just recently interviewed a celebrity chef and restaurateur, Donatella Arpaia, and I asked her about the challenges of restaurants. And that was, you think labor is always an issue, but food costs was exactly what she said. So yeah, it's great to talk about the stock market reaching all-time highs and people's 401k. What does that mean for me today when I go to the grocery store? And it affects so many things. And it's affecting business owners, which then trickles down and affects the consumers. And so we try to learn from our past mistakes. And I'm sure the Both sides of the Republicans and the Democrats try to do the same thing. So 2020 was a different type of an election year and cycle because of everything with COVID, but there were still things to be learned from that. So what lessons from the 2020 election are still relevant for businesses today in 2024?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is I think the lessons are less about the election itself and more of the political climate. It's an interesting time to be a business owner. I'm not one, but I can imagine it is for certain. It's an interesting time just to be alive. I think I read one time where we have more generations working together at the same time than we've ever had. And so you got young workers who want one thing, and you got older workers who want something else. And what we saw with 2020 was COVID. So there was the masking issues and businesses and how they handled COVID times about masking or being open or closed or delivery and whatnot. It became very political. And then we also had the social justice issues after George Floyd was killed. And you have younger generations in a lot of instances that want to invest in companies. When I say invest, shop with them, purchase things, or perhaps literally invest with them. They want companies that take a stance on things and maybe stand up to certain things or say things about a candidate or a movement. And you have older generations who, in some instances, are saying, look, I just want you to make product X so I can buy it. I don't care, or I definitely don't want you to take a stance on something that I might disagree with. And so companies have been in a really tough spot, I think, about trying to, walk that fine line of being involved in the political climate to try to bring in the most amount of customers. And I think companies are still trying to find that place. Some companies are saying, look, we have to be true to who we are, and they go full-fledged and they don't care the fallout. Other companies are trying to toe the line. We've seen them, pay the consequences or face difficult challenges. Bud Light comes to light, right? With that issue, they face some huge struggles with that business-wise. Again, not saying what's right or wrong. When they're a much bigger company, they can withstand negativity with that. But I do think those are the biggest lessons that, particularly new businesses, you need to be prepared that your customers may feel differently. And how are you going to handle that? Because you can't put, it back in the bottle once you pull it out sometimes. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson that companies need to try to sort through, is to figure out who they want to be, stick with it and be consistent, because all it takes is one bad moment in this era, especially with social media, even on a local level, whether it's in Ghana or somewhere else across the country, and it can wipe you out. And I think really thoughtfully thinking about who you are and staying true to your heart and making those decisions in a thoughtful manner, rather than just trying to jump on something that might get you viral for a day, but could ruin you for the years to come.
In business today, and even in life, there's a lot less margin of error. Something little becomes something big really quick, and it doesn't get erased and it doesn't go away. We talked about the current election cycle coming up, what businesses and business owners or individuals can expect. We're going to get through this election cycle just like we do every time, and someone's going to win. So what are your expectations for the business environment post-election, regardless of who wins?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think it does matter who wins, because it could change dramatically. I do think it's going to be a period of, on either side, because if Joe Biden wins, he won't have to worry about another reelection. And the truth is, we also don't know what Congress is going to happen. If that flips or stays split, getting things through Congress. But a Joe Biden winning is going to really try to get through what he just wants to get through, because he doesn't have to worry about another election, because he'll be in a second term. President Trump would be in the same situation, but he would likely dramatically change the sort of direction that Joe Biden has taken in the country. I think from a business standpoint, I think there's going to be a lot of wait and see, regardless of who wins post-election. There's probably going to be just a cooling period for several months to figure out the direction that the White House wants to take. But also in North Carolina, for instance, there's going to be a brand new governor, regardless of who wins that. It's an open seat. Congress, we don't know whether it's going to be split Republican, Democrat in split chambers. One party takes full control or not. And so I do think even towards the end of this year, I think we're going to see some sort of pulling back and trying to figure it out. And I know we'll talk about this some too. There's just the uncertainty is a killer for business. And I think it's been a period of uncertainty for maybe a decade for businesses from a political standpoint. If Donald Trump wins, we're probably going to see a dramatic push on things like immigration. I will probably see a push to pull back on some of the environmental changes that have been made through the Biden administration, which both would potentially dramatically business. If Joe Biden wins, there's probably going to be a push to push forward further on some of those things. So I think that's why when I say post-election, I think there's going to be almost this cooling off period for businesses to just sit back and say, okay, what does this mean for my business moving forward? And what does it mean for the larger economy for things like borrowing money? You mentioned a minute ago about companies and making those decisions about, some of those things that happen. Wage growth is one of those things. You talked about costs for restaurants. Wage have been an issue too. They've had to raise wages. And so what does that mean for their business if that continues? So I think it's going to be a cooling period to wait and see. There will be businesses out there. Donald Trump makes those moves that will make dramatic moves, try to ride the wave, for instance, of what he wants to do. And there'll probably be other business on the other side that will, particularly in the energy field with renewables, that will try to push forward hard to strike while the iron's hot too. But I think uncertainty is probably what we'll see first.
But you pointed out something that I really didn't think about, and that is both President Biden and President Trump, whoever wins, this is going to be the last time they can be president. And it's funny, but not so funny. It's like the first 2 years of the presidency, if they're in the lame duck period where they have nothing to lose, they're going to win again. Their party seems to back them really strong. And then now the next election cycle comes up and they start sometimes separating based on how the political environment or the feel from the voters are out there, and say, okay, yeah, supported this 2 years ago, but now we're up for re-election ourselves and we want to win. We have to, what are the ticking points today? So it's very interesting. I'm sure it's not happened too many times in our history where we're in a situation like this.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too is so much depends on what happens with Congress. It's a split Congress right now. It's been difficult to get anything done. In some ways, businesses don't mind a split government like that because it means nothing dramatic will happen to sway the pendulum one way or the other dramatically. And it provides a little bit of consistency. The difference is we're in an era where consumer confidence is obviously, that's always important, but the rhetoric plays a much more stronger role. And going back to your question about the media, in particular, what some would argue is partisan media or leaning media, it can have a huge impact on how people decide to spend their money and whether they decide to save a little more or spend a little more, depending on how they feel. Because so much of, I think, consumer confidence is how we feel about things. And so I do think that it's going to be interesting from that standpoint about, if Donald Trump gets in and he gets a Republican Congress, it's a red wave. I do think we're going to see fast, dramatic action. We saw that with Joe Biden when he won, because there was such a push for all that COVID funding, right? And it had a dramatic effect on, and it wasn't just him. Donald Trump's administration did it too beforehand, some, but they came in and pushed it further. And it did have an effect on inflation. It did have an effect on wage growth and how businesses responded. But if Joe Biden wins and Congress remains split, I think it means, at least for a couple of years, that we may see more of the same, which oddly for some businesses at least provides them some stability if they know that nothing dramatic is going to happen.
Tim, you talked about consumer uncertainty. Let's talk about consumer spending. How does the behavior typically change during an election year? And what are the potential impacts on businesses out there?
Yeah, that politically consumer spending isn't so important because that's what, as we mentioned, when people go to the polls, there's going to be all kinds of talk this summer about immigration and abortion and democracy and trials. But how people feel about their mortgage payment, what they're seeing at the grocery store, the aisles, plays such a huge role in that. And I don't know if it's going to impact how the consumers spend this year. Perhaps some will spend less if they're concerned about a dramatic change that could come after. Maybe they won't get a loan for a house, for car, for boat, because they're not sure about how a new change in administration or same will impact interest rates. because that does affect so much of the economy. It's so hard to understand. It's complicated, interest rates and what the Fed does, but it does have such a huge impact and trickle down effect all the way down to the bottom. But if that does happen and we see consumer confidence kind of change, I think businesses will see them pull back some too on their spending and what they're going to do. Election years are so weird, just period, because there's so much talk, but often there's little action. For instance, the North Carolina legislature's in right now. They can't wait to get in and get out as fast as possible. So I don't think we're going to see anything hugely dramatic from the legislature because of that. In Congress, it's tight because nobody wants to make too much of a move that would change things for the worse for them. So I think it's just going to be these small waves throughout the year of consumer confidence that we see, especially if we continue to see the Fed not move on interest rate, that probably won't have a huge impact. It's almost like we're hitting pause on a lot of things, waiting to see what's going to happen. And both sides, hoping that their side will win and that the impact will be beneficial for them. But I don't think we're going to see any dramatic change on consumer spending for the impact on the consumer, but also these businesses.
Let's continue to talk about consumer confidence, because it's important to a business, especially if it affects how people are spending and if they're hesitant, if they're waiting. But that doesn't change the fact that a business owner has to pay his rent every month and has to pay his employees. And so they're watching this and they're watching the political climate fluctuate at times. How can they adapt to their strategies during this time?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things with that. I mean, if they're in a position where they've been stable, obviously, for, a long stay in the community, I do think that a lot of those companies are just staying patient, managing the course, and then, planning some long-term, but being cautious about that. And that's a challenge, I think, for the economy as a whole, because people want to make big moves or want to plan for the long term because, while you're spending in your short term, you obviously have that other funding, capital funding, whether it be to expand a building or to bring a new machine to help make business better. But I think companies, may sit some of that stuff out, at least temporarily, to try to avoid, I always think in any business, in my own life with my own household budget, the wild swings are very difficult to manage. And so I do think we might see a little bit of a savings. There's always so much talk about how much money all corporations have that they're not spending. But the truth is that there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And I think there's keeping it in reserve. And watching credit card debt, for instance, on a consumer side, that's an important thing to watch, because are people going to hold on to the money to pay that off, or are they going to keep spending? And that impacts consumer spending, which then obviously impacts people's willingness to spend, businesses. That's obviously hugely important toward the end of the year when we talk about end of year Christmas shopping that so many businesses rely on for their survival every year. And that now that there's these Christmas sales are now starting in September. And what they're doing is they're trying to get people to spend more periodically because people are unwilling to drop $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 at once over a 2-month period because of the uncertainty in the market. And so I think businesses can and probably should respond in the same way, being more cautiously optimistic in the circumstances where they feel good about their growth, but also others that are concerned about, is there a cliff on the other side? There's a lot of cliffs that are happening right now in the world. Childcare industry, the businesses are really struggling. They can't get enough people to work for them. There's a lot of regulations they're facing. The funding is running out from the federal government during COVID time, which that impacts families. And so then you have perhaps less people in the workforce because a mom or dad has to stay home, or they're not able to. So then you got less employees that you're working with and you can't provide the same kind of services, which impacts the business. And so I think long-term and short-term planning all at the same time is really important. And I'm a risk taker, but I'm a very cautious risk taker. And so if I was running a business right now, I think I'd be taking a lot more calculated risks, probably than dramatic risks. I hate to say those kinds of things because that can slow an economy. And I'm not in the business of doing that. That's not my business. But it is a volatile time, to say the least.
Long-term planning is essential and important to any business. But we mentioned, and we talked about a little while ago, that the impact of the election, depending on who wins, can dramatically affect what's going to happen to the economy and to business. Now we're looking at it several months out, and we can ask ourselves, are there any long-term trends that you can foresee continuing beyond 2024 election and that businesses can be preparing for now?
Yeah, and back to what I was saying a minute ago, by the way, I think focusing on certain T's is probably super important, right? Because those are things that you can really count on. And that's a time, I think, when there's volatility that you can, cautiously take risks and move forward with that. I do think interest rates, for instance, I mean, every economist I've talked to, they firmly believe that rates are going to start coming down. It's just a matter of when. And so I don't think we're going to see rates go up, for instance, because of that, because inflation is continuing to rise. So I do think we're going to see some inflation continue to drop some. I think it's going to be small increments, and this is based on economists that I talked to. So I do think we're going to see a trend in the short, long term of prices not dramatically rising for all kinds of products. Unfortunately, I do think we're going to continue to see an increase in energy price. So that's something I think that businesses probably need to plan for and implement into their costs based on what we're seeing. Interest rates, as I mentioned, I do think we're going to see continue to drop. So if you're going to need to borrow money in early 2025, probably regardless of who goes into the White House, we're going to at least see incremental small drops, even if they're just very small. We're not going to see rates go up. So I think there's probably some safety in with that. I don't think we're going to see dramatic tax changes. Although, for instance, in North Carolina, if the Republican wins the executive mansion and Republicans keep into a supermajority, I do think we could see a continued cut in taxes there in the future. But there is already, if people look into it, there are already built-in tax cuts over the next few years that those are already in place. So taxes are a circumstance where it's likely to be somewhat stable moving forward. So I do think why we could see dramatic policy changes, I do think most of the fundamentals of what businesses deal with will be fairly incremental in what we see, whether it's fairly up or slightly down.
Interest rates, food costs, cost of goods, labor issues. There's another issue that's affecting a lot of business owners and really Americans here in general. And that's the rising cost of insurance, both on the medical side, but both on the business side also, insuring your property. How is that going to affect or come into play, if any, during this election?
Yeah, what's interesting is I just did one of my front porch shows on insurance in North Carolina, because the particular coastal states are really dealing with an issue with insurance coverage, homeowners, and it's obviously going to affect businesses too, because of whether you want to call it climate change or global warming. We're seeing a lot more storms than we've ever seen, and the cost to reinsure and replace that has been astronomical the past several years, and forecasting shows that it's going to increase more and more. And yes, that is going to be a huge struggle moving forward in a state like North Carolina, where values are going up because so many people are moving to a state like North Carolina for both homeowners and businesses. There's where I live in Garner and Wake County, there's the revaluations just happened, and home prices have gone up in some instances 60, 70%. And so the cost of that insurance is going to go way up. The alternative is that, though, and we've seen it in some instances, I think 10,000 policies, they just dropped along the coast last October. And so that is going to be a huge challenge of not just the increase in cost, finding coverage, particularly for businesses along coastal areas, but also it's not just a coastal issue. Those increases are going to be spread out. We're going to share those costs across the state. They're going to be more, but they're going to share them. I mean, there's tornadoes inland, there's wildfires in the mountains. And so we're in North Carolina in particular, we're going to share all these costs. And there was an increased rate proposal for almost 50% in the state of North Carolina. I don't think it's going to end up there. They're likely going to negotiate down further down. But that is a cost that is going to come on. And for businesses to try to explain to their consumers that they've got to pass this along somehow because of their cost, when you have an era of consumers that are tired of paying increased costs, it's going to be a very difficult challenge. So businesses are going to have to sort through how they either want to absorb that cost, absorb some of it, pass it along. And frankly, how they explain that to consumers is a very, very, very difficult task for them. And it is something that I think we're going to continue to see down the line here, unless something dramatically changes about how we do that. And there's not a lot of push in the legislatures to make dramatic changes in this, because there's just not an easy solution that is digestible or tolerable to both those that provide insurance, those that provide services, businesses, and the consumers at the end of that.
Tim, what is your outlook for business owners, businesses, even consumers post election? I know a lot of that's going to depend on who wins, but I think it's an important subject to broach.
I think businesses in all industries are in a very tough spot right now, not because of the economy or because they can't survive, but there's just so much dramatic change happening in all aspects of our lives. I mean, we're facing this in the media industry, right? When I first started in this business, we watched largely 3 newscasts every single night. And there were a couple of national cable channels that people largely watched when there was major breaking news. Columbine was one of the first ones I watched on a cable network. But you knew who to go to, and advertisers knew who to advertise with, because that was the place that millions of people went to all at once. Flash forward now to 2024, and as you're talking about 2025, people aren't just watching it on one channel, they're watching it on multiple channels, hundreds of channels. Some of them aren't watching them on channels. They're watching them streaming on a phone. They're not even watching it on a streaming channel. They're watching it on YouTube. They're watching 2-minute clips. So the ability to reach audiences is very difficult. And I'm not so sure the election is going to necessarily impact those sorts of challenges for businesses, particularly small businesses, particularly local businesses. You can't just advertise in the local newspaper or go on the local radio show and you're going to reach people and they're going to come to you right away. And so I think the outlook is for businesses is that they're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to be very creative in how they reach their customers. They're going to have to be very focused on who they are. I do think authenticity is underrated and extraordinarily important for businesses in reaching their audiences, because I think it's super important for consumers in this day and age. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence, but there's going to be a lot of good things with artificial intelligence to make things more efficient for even local businesses. But there's a lot of scary things out there with artificial intelligence. I've been reporting on some of that soon. And there's a lot that's going to disrupt the business world again. We're like in an era of constant disruption. So I think that's going to affect people far more than the election's going to. I think the election is going to be more long-term than that. It's going to be as simple as the TikTok decision politically. That is TikTok going to sell? And that's how a lot of businesses are reaching people these days. So managing disruption, I think, is going to be the main focus for folks in 2025, probably even more so than what happened in the election.
AI is probably going to be a topic for many of your shows and podcasts for the foreseeable future. I'd love to have you back and talk about the effect on business again, because we could do a multi-part series on that, I'm sure. We have something upcoming. So you're in the journalism and the broadcast business, and we have upcoming potentially what's going to be must-see TV. And I don't know if it's in a good way, but they've agreed to do the presidential elections and even a presidential election, the debate before the election. And they've agreed to do a vice presidential debate before the elections. We talk about consumer confidence and the effects on business. There is I don't know about a high probability, but there's a probability of some point that these debates could get slightly ugly and be somewhat negative. And we have people from around the world watching, and sometimes the U.S. can be looked at as a laughing stock when our leaders are sinking to low levels. But if it does go there, which I hope it doesn't, but if it does, how does that affect consumer confidence?
Yeah, just on the debate front first, we're on an unprecedented time for the last several decades with these debates, because traditionally there's been a debate commission that has handled these debates. They've been offered to everybody. There's typically 3 of them. They're after Labor Day. Both candidates agree. They're fairly structured. This time they're throwing out the commission altogether. They're negotiating individually with news organizations. And we're seeing one in June where before they're actually even officially the nominees for their party. So it's really early at this standpoint. And I still am in the mind, when we see it, I'll believe it to some extent, because I just, there's going to be so many disagreements about how these things are done and whether they get there. But to your point, it's earlier, so it could have an effect on, I said after Labor Day, their pockets. But if there are comments made off the cuff about a policy that will scare the heck out of business, it could change the trajectory of that candidate. But more importantly, for a niche audience, and obviously business is a niche, but there's a lot of issues that come up, healthcare and all kinds of things, abortion, that come up that aren't necessarily about taxes or immigration policy related to business. But if that comes up, I do think it could change things potentially dramatically for consumer confidence, but particular businesses that are concerned about, whether they want to expand in early 2025 or whether they want to unveil a new product in early 2025, or whether they hear something that says, you know what, I might want to wait until third quarter 2025 to do that, which changes how they might employ people, the product that they bring in to build that product, for instance, if it's a new product on the line. Yeah, I think it has a huge, particular era where things spread so fast on social media. People believe things that may not be true. They will share things that may not be true. With AI, they may see things that they think are true and are not, and then share it. That consumer confidence, the wave of it can change so fast that I do think it could have an impact on businesses. We'll see. I'll see. It's the midst of summer when people are trying to take a vacation, probably don't want to think about the presidential election. But the first one, I think at first will probably be must-see TV just for the potential of the drama in it. It's unprecedented. We'll have to wait and see, but there is the potential for that, no question.
I highly encourage anyone that watches the debate to do what I do. And I mentioned it earlier. After the debate's over, then go from CNN to MSNBC to Fox and the different news channels and hear the take on it. Because again, it's almost like these people were all watching a different debate. And so it's funny. But that leads me to the next question, Tim. How is it, or how much of a struggle is it, if any, to report on things you were on both floors of the conventions? How are you able to be unbiased and try to report what's in front of you without?
It's so funny. I get this question a lot, obviously. And I hope because I'm viewed as one of the most fair journalists out there. But it's ironic because I don't find it hard. And I feel like I'm on an island sometimes in this era because of that, because I try to be so fair. Because as you mentioned, Fox and CNN are at worst viewed in that way, and at best viewed that way, and at worst are that way. And part of the problem is people are seeking out to watch things that only reinforce their own beliefs. And so they're not getting the other side at all and understanding that there are other views, that some of what they think are fact may not be fact. And so I joke with people that I've spent this last week, it was 25 years I've been doing this professionally, and I've been in 22 and a half in North Carolina, that I don't think I could do anything outside of this business where I needed to have an opinion because I focused so much on not having an opinion. I'm genuinely curious about people's different viewpoints. And I am hugely focused on trying to get people to just have a conversation again. If there's anything I do for the rest of my career, whether it be Capital Tonight or my front porch or my podcast, it's just to keep people talking. Because the big problem we have right now is people don't want to talk to people that they disagree with. They just don't. And social media has allowed people to get fired up very quickly about that. And they get defensive. And so then they can't even talk to each other. And so I see my job as seeing both of those sides, or 3 or 4 or 5 sides, trying to get to the bottom of what the actual facts are and present that to people in a way that they can truly decide for themselves based on their own set of personal beliefs and viewpoints and where they are in their lives professionally, personally. The challenge is that people, I think, everyone says politicians have changed so much. I think the audience has changed a lot where they only want to hear that part. I also have a strong belief from my own perspective that people don't care what my beliefs on my background are that would have an influence on my belief on it. I get it. The longer I do this, the more people know me, it's almost like they think it's fun to try to figure out which way I might lean one way or the other. But I don't personally believe that people should care about that. I get why they do, but also I just don't think it has any influence on what I do for a living. And so I don't understand why people do put their bias in it. I just don't get it. It's happened. I get it that it's out there, But I just don't, it's just simple to me that it's just my opinion should not matter.
It's very interesting. A large segment of our audience are business brokers or M&A advisors. And I've watched the careers of the really successful people in our industry, and they're dealing with sellers of businesses every day, and they're dealing with buyers of businesses every day. And the ability to get them to come together in agreement on something in order to get a deal done, because if it's lopsided one way or the other, it's never going to happen. So the ability to do that, I think, leads to a lot of the comparisons. Sometimes I've heard people talk about M&A advisors or business brokers say, "Oh, you should be a politician." And they jokingly say that, but you have to, even a really good politician, they have the ability, a Ronald Reagan-like effect, to attract both sides of parties. And I don't know if that's harder to do today than it has ever before, because there's so much extreme one way or another, and the more towards the center seems to be going away.
Yeah, incredibly different politically, because money and partisan politics is running elections these days. You cannot win, for better or for worse, you cannot win a race, even a local city council race, without raising money and reaching people. And the people that are controlling this on either side and have raised the money are largely far on the left or far on the right. And if you get money from an organization or a group or a PAC or whatever, and you say things or vote in certain ways that sway from that far left or far right, that money goes away instantly. And then you can't run TV yet, can't hire staff. And soon enough, you got another person from that far left or right running against you, and they have all the money and the resources and the support from those folks that are much more intimately involved with politics than the more likely moderate average Jane and Joe sitting at home in public who's doing a lot of the voting. And so it is a very lonely, difficult position for the quote unquote moderate politicians to be in, even if they veer one way or the other, or just simply want to work with the other side on a bill. And they get chastised for, sometimes I've heard stories of politicians getting chastised for eating lunch with somebody from the other party. That happened. And the same is true in journalism in some ways. Everybody keeps crying that they want trusted and even-handed journalism, but that's a famous, popular thing to say, and we've had success with it. But the truth is, a lot of people just don't want that. They want to say that, but they just want to hear, if they're conservative, Fox News reinforce their own beliefs. And so, yeah, the middle is a very lonely place, and it makes it difficult, frankly, for policy and laws to get passed and move forward. And that's why you see so much stalemate in Washington and in state legislatures.
That's also a great lesson for businesses and business owners. Really successful business owners in every industry, they are those that are willing to listen to their employees, to the consumer on both sides, and try to get an understanding of how they could please their consumer, please their employees. And look, a lot of times great ideas from a company that build them to an even better company come from an opposing view from a colleague or an employee or from someone but they took the time to listen to them and then debate constructively, not yelling and screaming, but constructively debate back and forth with one another. And something that comes out of it could be magical and something wonderful for a business.
Yeah, 1000%. And you made me think about, I don't know if people on the History Channel, some of my favorite shows are like The Food That Built America, The Machines That Built America. There's one out now called Disney That Built America, I think. What's fascinating about that is you have major rivals in businesses, Coke and Pepsi, Ford and GM. And yeah, they're heated rivals, but what they're really doing is taking what the other side does in some instances, and they're trying to improve on it and make it better. They're taking their ideas, even if they didn't like the way that theirs is or the way that they did it, but they're trying to one up them or make it better. I think it's about even like religion, and I hate to talk about religion. I'm not going to, but
Look, we've done all the major sins: religion, politics.
It cracks me up because I tend to think that people that are challenged in their own beliefs, religion being one of those, but even on policy, I think it should, if you're so right or just believe so strongly, it should only make you stronger in your beliefs if you have a conversation with somebody, or may make you better in your beliefs if someone provides something interesting or unique to you to do that. And I think that happens in the business world, like we're saying with the competition and the one-upping, is that it makes them better for doing that. And I think there's an argument to be made that we're not better now because we're off in our own corners and not even looking at the other side. So then you're missing things out. And I think legislation is probably weaker because of it. And that's why you're seeing other bills that are passed to fix problems in other laws, because they didn't seek out the other side. They didn't have foresight to see that there might be a problem with it.
Tim, our time is quickly coming to an end, but I have one more question, and then I want to follow it up with something else, but I'll be quick. We talked about a lot of things about the election cycle, about how it affects businesses, consumer confidence. So what is the last piece of advice you would have to the listening audience in preparation for the roller coaster ride we're about to be on for the next 4 or 5 or so months?
Yeah, I think in any aspect of life, I would say don't overreact to anything. And sometimes I talk for a living. I'm talking a lot today. I interview people. I talk for a living. One of the best skills in journalism is to listen. And it's the most underrated skill out there. And sometimes I was doing a story last week up in the mountains of North Carolina where a paper mill had shut down. And there was all this discussion about we want to be better in the long run and we got to take advantage of this. And I was at a football stadium and I looked up and there was a thing at the tunnel about the field and it said, "How will you be remembered?" And the fact that I just shut up and looked and saw that sign, it wrote the story for me. And so I think there's a lot of that in the business world right now. If I was running a business, I'd be spending some time listening, but not overreacting and thinking things through thoroughly, but also planning for the future. And one thing I do, for better or for worse, is I think about all contingencies. So have planning for all things that could happen, even if it doesn't have to be detailed about moving forward exactly. But I would be preparing myself for, even though it takes time and energy and resources, I would be coming up with contingency plans for what no matter happens in this election, because you don't want to be caught flat-footed either if something does happen to happen dramatically quickly.
Tim, based on the conversation we had today and just how fascinating it is, and just your take on things and how you describe things, I believe you're going to see an increase in your listening audience just from the people that are listening. So in order for that to happen, how can they listen to you? How can they get more information from you?
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm blessed every time someone wants to hear me talk, and that I don't bore people to death. But I appreciate your time today and the invite. It's been an honor. The Tying It Together with Tim Boyum podcast, you literally can get that anywhere you get podcasts. It comes out every Wednesday morning. We're actually in the midst of a series on gun violence at the moment, but we do talk about a lot of business issues. We have leaders on from the legislature, Congress. Joe Biden's been on in the past from a TV interview I did. But anyways, you can get that wherever you get your podcast. So really anywhere. Just Google Tying It Together with Tim Boyum. My monthly show, Front Porch Politics, is on Spectrum News 1. My nightly show, Capital Tonight's on at 7 o'clock every single night. You can go to spectrumlocalnews.com to watch that. Get the Spectrum News app. You can download that no matter where you live in the country. You can stream that, as well as we put those on there. And even if for some reason they're not a Spectrum News customer, we hope they'd sample it and then become a Spectrum News customer. You can get views on that without being a subscriber, a few of those a month. Feel free to sample the product, and hopefully it leads to some subscriptions down the line.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more of your stories and listening to more of what you bring to the table. And so thank you for so graciously giving of your time today for our audience. I could tell you it was much appreciated and learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to everybody.
Wow. Now that was a lot of information and gives us a lot to think about. And after listening to Tim, hopefully you feel more informed and aware of what's to come during the upcoming election cycle. I want to thank you for listening today. You can subscribe to our show by going to ibba.org/insights. You'll have access to all of our past shows, and by subscribing, you'll never have to miss another episode. Again, I want to thank you for listening today. Make sure you go out and vote this upcoming election. And this way you can have a say in what happens in your business and your life. All right.